How are you? It's Dr. Amoso. Today we want to talk about the French foreign policy. We want to talk about what took place in France before the French Revolution. The revolution eventually occurred in 1789. But before the revolution took place in 1789, we want to analyze, we want to look on the foreign policy that existed in France before the period of 1789. So the French foreign policy, it was characterized by important factors, by important points. Which were the factors, which were the points that characterized the French Revolution, the foreign policy of the French Revolution before the period of 1789? Number one, the matrimonial alliance. Matrimonial alliance will be looking on what took place on the leaders that were in the country marrying to Austria. Number two, we also talk about the commercial treaties that France signed. We'll look on the Eden Treaty that was signed by France. We also look in the wars that France was involved in. France was involved in two wars, the American War of Independence and also the Seven-Year War. So the French foreign policy, it was characterized by these three important factors: the matrimonial alliances, the commercial treaties, and the wars that France fought. These factors, they eventually contributed to the war, to the revolution of 1789. So we are seeing that the factors, the importance of these factors now explains why people had to rebel in 1789. They had to say enough is enough. They had to revolt against the government of Louis the 16th. Now, let's now talk about number one. Let's start with the wars that France was involved in. Let's start with the Seven-Year War. It was a war between France and Austria, that is the Seven-Year War. So France and Austria, they combined and they to fight against England. France was dragged into this war by Ali Austria. She was invited by Austria to become part and parcel of this war, and they to invade, they to attack England. And this war, it took 7 good years from 1756 up to 1763. We see that this war, France was not prepared to become part and parcel of this war. She had to borrow the what? She had to borrow money so that she was going to be in a position of participating in this war. Participating in this war, it had so many negative impacts. It had so many negative connotations on what was going to occur in the country. Let's look on the effects of the Seven-Year War. Number one, the war landed France into serious war debt. She was now financially crippled by participating in this war. We see that France became a bankruptcy by borrowing the monies that she used to participate in this war. And in this war, we also see that France lost the war against England. They lost this war against Britain. She also lost valuable colonies in India and also in Canada. So the Seven-Year War had negative connotations on France. France was crippled financially, and she also lost her colonies in India and also in Canada. Let's move on and talk about the American War of Independence. This American War of Independence, again, it had far-reaching effects on France. We discovered that there were 13 British colonies that were in America. And these 13 British colonies that were in America, they waged a war against America. They wanted to be independent. These colonies in America, they to wage this war for three important reasons. There are three important factors that explains why they to wage a war against America. Number one, they wanted to be independent. They wanted their independence. They also wanted to declare the rights of men and citizens. They wanted their rights. They wanted to be listened to. They wanted to be what considered as important people in the society. And lastly, we also see that these men, they were against the 13 pence tax which Britain was going to introduce. So Britain was going to introduce a tax of 13 pence, and the people in the colonies were not pleased about this, so that to what wage a war against America. But however, it is important to know that France had nothing to do with this war. But we see that France decided to partake in this war. She wanted to revenge the defeat of the 7 Year War, and she waged a war against Britain. But now we see that by participating in this war, France now ended up in serious financial crisis. We, the leaders of France now, they participated in this war. They could not listen to the reform ministers. We had to advise them not to participate in this war, but they could not listen. And we are going to see that France now became so much financially crippled, and by so doing now people were frustrated, leading to the revolution of 1789. So let's now look on the impact of this war on France, that is the American War of Independence. Number one, we have talked about the issue of debt. France was plunged into a serious, big debt. Number two, the soldiers who participated in the American War of Independence, they returned back with revolutionary ideas. And another issue is that Lafayette, we see that he had to influence the people to revolt against many taxes that were introduced, the taxes that were meant to revive the financial situation that was in the country. So the American War of Independence, again, it had negative effects on France. Number two, let's talk about the Eden Agreement. Eden is EDN, the Eden Agreement. So the Eden Agreement, we see that the Eden of Britain, it was signed with France. They agreed on a free trade policy, and they also agreed that the British goods were going to enter France without paying import duties or tariffs. France products would enter Britain for free. So that was the Eden Treaty that France yet to sign. But signing this Eden Treaty now, we see that again it had some negative effects. Which were these? Number one, the French industries, they were affected, they were severely affected by this Eden Treaty. We also see that France preferred to buy quality and cheaper goods from Britain. So that is why she had to sign this treaty. But we see that they lost revenue to Britain. So economically, France was affected by the Eden Treaty, as it contributed to bankruptcy. So the Eden Treaty that France had to sign with Britain now, it had also far-reaching effects on France economically. So economical challenges that France started to experience explains why the revolution of 1789 yet to occur. Number three, let's talk about the matrimonial alliances. Here we are talking about the leaders marrying from Austria. So Austria, we see that she had to drag France into the disastrous 7 Year War. We see that it was because Louis was married from Austria. He married from Austria. But now, the people in France, they hated the Austrian lady because she influenced the king to dismiss able reform ministers. She also influenced the king to block economical reforms that were going to revamp and improve the French economy. So by so doing now, she was so much unpopular. She was extravagant, So your personality, your character, your coming from Austria led the people to be frustrated. It explains why the revolution had to take place in 1789. Then let's now conclude. So what are we saying? We are saying that France's interaction with the outside world led to the French Revolution. So your interaction with the outside world led to the French Revolution. The treaty, that is the Eden Treaty, that she signed with Britain, it affected the French industries, resulting in manufacturers losing a lot of revenue. They blamed their government for the Eden Treaty that France yet to sign. The wars that France was involved in, they led France into a big debt. France borrowed to sponsor these wars, and she was unable to pay the debt, resulting in France being crippled economically and also financially. So the wars led France to borrow, leading to France what serious financial crisis. So that is what we have on the French foreign policy before the revolution. So a foreign policy was not lucrative like what you are seeing, and it was because of this foreign policy which was disastrous that explains why the French Revolution had to occur in 1789. Which are the practice questions which comes on the French foreign policy before the French Revolution of 1789? Number one, examine the French foreign policy before the French Revolution of 1789. Number two, explain how Britain and Austria contributed to the French Revolution of 1789. So that is what we have on the French foreign policy before the French Revolution of 1789. Thank you so much. It's Dr. Moso.